will be having some conversation today all right. Good morning, everybody. What's happened with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Gustavo Suarez, Planning Technical Lead from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Happy to be here this morning. I think it is one of the best part of my work for the Army Corps is have the feedback from the public, hear from different perspectives. So I'm glad to be here this morning and looking at familiar faces. We started this process a year ago, and I'm happy to see people involved in this process. Today, the goal, go to the next slide, please. So we're here for the CSF 216 Resiliency Study. The goal for today's meeting is to start the conversation and performance metrics. We're going to have some alternatives in what we're going to do for the flood risk management of the study. Just to make clear, we are used to ecosystem restoration. We have a lot of projects in this area. This project is unique. It's on flood risk management. So the approach and the modeling, the approach that we are having is different to what we are used to. And just to make clear that everybody understand that, and our team is going to talk about that during this presentation. The goal today, go to the next slide, Jenny, is to start the conversation and performance metrics, how we are going to evaluate our alternatives, right? So we have a lot of people from the Army Corps here with a lot of experience. Some experts. We have our economic team is heavy in this meeting today, but we don't live here, right? So at the end of this project, you are the ones that live here. You know the problems that we have. So what we want is from here with you. We have in our tables notes. Notes to collect your input. We have maps, so all that input will be collecting that, but it's important that you share what is important to you today. So that's the goal of this meeting today. Now we have an agenda, presentation overview of the project. We have some of our leadership welcoming at this meeting, and we will have some breakout sections to discuss the economic accounts. Our economic team is going to present that today, and we'll be having that discussion. Each table will be discussing the accounts. So important, again, that you have your input, what is important to you. We want to hear that from you. And each table we have discussion on the accounts. Each table will summarize the accounts in per risk. And at the end, we will be having a general discussion per week. So I will be giving some instructions when we start the breakout sections. Right, thank you. And we have some of our leadership doing some remarks, Marcy.
All right, good. Oh, okay. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Jackson. I work with the Army Corps of Engineers, Jacksonville District. I'm the plan formulation branch chief there. So oversee all the planning studies within, our area of responsibility. I appreciate everyone being here today. This is really important for this study to kick off. Our goal today, as Gustavo said, is really getting your input on how we're going to evaluate and compare plans. So what does that mean? That really means, like, as we formulate plans for this study, modifying the structures, we've been approved, or we're planning to get approved for a scope. It's limited and smaller than what we wanted. But taking that input here today, we will be able to compare and evaluate plans. Which plan is better than the other based on the input we received today? So what's important to you guys is what we'll evaluate plans on and go forward. So I'm not going to be long-winded. I'm going to end it there. I'm here to answer any questions. I'll be part of the process today, and I'll turn it over to Ava. Any other opening remarks?
Oh, I was told to stand here so I could be heard by online. My name is Ava Velez, and I am the chief of the ecosystem branch for the programs and project management division of the Jacksonville district. That means that Marcy is my partner. So she's in the planning division. I'm in program and project management. So we are the folks in charge of integrating all the technical offices and tracking budget and tracking schedule. And so I'm here today, pretty excited. This is a really important day. So thank you for being here in person. Thank you for being with us online. And I would emphasize something that Marcy said in my own words, which is that today is about shaping the way we think about this plan, right? Our goal is we want a set of solutions that we take to the Congress to ask for permission to build them. That's our goal at the end of this study. We're hoping, right, that we would then have a plan that gets written and described where the Congress can act upon it in a Water Resources Development Act. In order to do that, we have to justify it. And in order to justify it, the skeleton or the DNA of that justification is what we're doing today. So the metrics, how we think about, how we measure either benefits or effects is really the most important piece, that we are clear and that it's based on what you think because you're the ones that know. So thank you for being here. I hope you stay engaged all morning, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. You've got pretty much the whole set of experts from the Corps and the Water Management District here. So if something sounds like jargon, just ask. We'll do our best to explain it. But thank you. I'll turn it to Carolina.
So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your knowledge, your expertise, your local understanding of the issues that we have here for this discussion. We are reaching one more good step in this study as we progress and try to identify critical components that we all need to account for as we are planning. As you all know, we might have tools limitations, processes limitations, time limitations that doesn't allow us to be fully studying and understanding this region and the basin and the proposals that we're going to be discussing. And that's why we need those meetings. We need those meetings to take advantage of the best judgment, best understanding, local experience, knowledge. So we really appreciate you all coming here and helping us to study, to understand, to capture the important things that we need to capture so we can move efficiently throughout the study and with the essential understanding of the things we need to understand. The determination of those metrics is a very important step on the study. This is how we are going to be later selecting alternatives, selecting measures within the alternatives. So for us to be able to navigate in the world of possibilities, and again, understanding that we have limitations in planning capacity in general, it's very important that we are smart, that we are, I would say, mindful about what we want to be able to measure here and how that would represent the ideal plan that we all want to see out of this effort. So again, we cannot do that without you all. We need your help, we need your knowledge, we need your expertise. So please spend your time sharing as much as possible on considerations that we all need to account for. And I just want to use this time here to thank the the planning team that put together this meeting to begin with. This room is amazing. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Gustavo, the entire Army Corps that sat and really found one more place. We have a large area. We need to find a central location, easy, that we can all kind of meet and discuss. This is important as well as part of the process. So again, thank you all for being here. Thanks for organizing and bringing us all here today. Let's take advantage of this time as much as we can. Don't hesitate to write, even if you are leaving and you have one more note to give us, write in a little stick note and leave us so you don't forget anything that you want to bring to the table today. Okay, thank you. We don't have this opportunity all the time, so let's take advantage of the time here. And thank you again for being here with us today. So with that, I will turn back to Tim. You start, Tim.
That's the mic.
Right here. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I can't wander around.
No.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Well, I got dark in here. Okay. So I'll try to make this quick. So I know we want to get to the meat of the presentation and talk about performance metrics and our categories that we analyze for this project. But I do want to do a quick project overview just to kind of refresh everybody what we're doing, where we are in the process. My name is Tim Geisen. I'm the project manager for the Corps. I want to introduce Jenny Smith, who's in the back of the room. She's my counterpart with the Water Management District. She's facilitating our online virtual component. So thank you, Jenny, for doing that. All right, next slide. All right, so just to remind everybody what our objective is. This is a flood risk management study. So we're here to address flood risk management issues, particularly those most immediate need in the coastal areas. We're already seeing impacts from sea level rise, from changed conditions due to urbanization, all kinds of issues. So we're really focused on that flood risk management component, as opposed to some of the other projects that the Corps has going on, like DVC, or that's focused on ecosystem restoration. This is flood risk management. Next slide. All right. So as you're probably aware, we've divided our study area up into 4 planning reaches, which correspond with the 4 models that are being developed. Those cover all of Broward, Southern Palm Beach, and then all of Dade County. We have our tables broken out into these planning reaches. So if you're sitting at a table that you're not interested in, you may want to switch as we get into the feedback. So this is kind of what this looks like. Next slide. All right. Again, our focus scope is really on the most vulnerable coastal structures. So the structures and canals that are bringing water to those structures. When we originally started this study, we had a much broader kind of scope looking at storage inland, trying to capture some of that water before it makes it to the coast. That part of our scope, we've kind of limited, realized that trying to capture too much, we weren't going to be able to get done and get to these immediate needs of the structure capacity. So we're going to focus in this project now on those coastal structures, the conveyance of water to those structures. That doesn't mean we don't know that storage is really important. It is. It's just we're not going to be able to tackle it under this scope, but we do have other efforts which we will look at storage, and we will document as part of this effort that that's a big thing that is needed in the area as well. Next slide. All right, this is a little confusing, but it's really just a flow chart of our planning process, right? We've got our hazards and issues on the left here that feed into our modeling tools. So the Mike Shee models that Amanda's going to talk to you a little bit about in a minute. Those models will produce output, flows, and stages that we can then use to evaluate how those flows and stages affect the infrastructure in our communities. And then in order to evaluate that data, we focus on what's called NED, and Eric will cover this, and that's through the FDA tool. So that's an economics tool that uses the output from Mike Shee. And then we have our metrics that we then evaluate based on that model data output. Again, we'll use that to focus our alternative evaluation once we get to that point. But in addition to the traditional economic benefits that we look at, we want to also look at our other accounts. So that's what we're here today, to really focus on these other accounts, things like regional economics, social effects within the communities, environmental benefits and effects. So in addition to the traditional economic analysis, our analysis will be based on all of these items, which we'll get into today. And we call that our total benefits evaluation. All right, next slide. All right, got a hot mic. All right. So this is just our schedule, kind of an overview. A lot of you have probably seen this before. We're right in the transition between finishing up our scoping and getting into our formulation process. So we're finishing up the modeling tools, building our metrics before we really get into the part of the process where we'll start developing alternatives. We'll get back together and talk about that at another time. Again, today we're focused on how we're going to evaluate the performance of any plans that we do develop. So our schedule has us completing by the September of 2026, trying to make it into a WRDA or an authorization by 2026. Our schedule right now, it's still proposed. It hasn't been approved by the Assistant Secretary of the Army. That process is still ongoing, but this is the schedule that we proposed and that we're following unless told otherwise. So kind of those next steps after we're done here, I'll talk about those at the end, but no, we're still early on in the process. This is a really important time, as Ava and Carolina both mentioned. This is your opportunity to really provide a lot of feedback, to really shape how we'll do the evaluations. And the categories that aren't our national economics that Eric will talk about, your expertise and local knowledge are really what are going to help us come up with a really valuable way to evaluate our performance. So I can't overstate how important it is that we're all here today and working on this effort together. I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Bredesen, our H&H modeling lead for the Corps, and she's going to talk a little bit about the modeling. So Amanda?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As Tim mentioned, my name is Amanda Bredesen. I'm the lead water resources engineer for Jacksonville District. And today I'll just be providing a really brief overview of our H&H tools and hopefully give you guys a little bit of an introduction and an overview of the input and outputs to better inform you, give you some more context on the performance metrics that we'll be discussing today. So, next slide. So as Tim mentioned, we're kind of in the getting past the scoping phase, and during that phase, our modeling sub-team met and evaluated multiple different H&H software tools that we could use to study for the 216, and we evaluated different criteria such as ability to model groundwater integration, sea level rise, perform detailed event-based modeling, compatibility with our economic tools. And based off of all of that criteria, we landed on the Mike Hydro tools by DHI. And we're fortunate enough to already have baseline models available in this area from South Florida Water Management District's flood protection level of service and the Broward resiliency effort. And so those are kind of our springboard off of that effort, but we are modifying those existing models specifically for this project to meet our needs. So I just wanted to capture some of the capabilities of the tools in case you guys are not familiar. First and foremost, it is able to conduct sub-regional scale simulations. So obviously this is a highly urbanized area. We have a large model domain, large area to cover, and it is able to complete that type of simulation with a high level of accuracy and detail. And we can balance kind of the model run times. It's able to be completed within our study scope and schedule. Secondly, we're able to simulate the groundwater and surface water interaction. As you all know, groundwater is a very important component to the water budget in this area. So accounting for things like rising water tables due to sea level rise, we wanted to make sure we captured that in the modeling, including the boundary conditions that are unique for the study, the coastal surge influence and sea level rise, rainfall intensification, all of those types of things can be simulated in Mike Hydro. And then finally, comprehensive operational flexibility. Again, as you guys know, this is a very complex system, highly managed, very urbanized setting. We can include that operational flexibility, use things like calibrated flow parameters for the canal structures to really hone in on that unique, the unique operations of this system, such as pre-storm drawdown, including the salinity operations under surge conditions. So things like that can be included and are included in this model. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are adapting the model specifically for this study. One of the larger changes is that we are performing additional calibration and validation downstream of the salinity control structure. So we're expanding the models to the intracoastal or Biscayne Bay, depending on the reach. And that's really so we can understand any transfer of risk downstream of these structures. So we want to be able to kind of measure any potential impact, whether it's positive or negative in this region. We're also including future land use and land cover. So we're incorporating things like the 2040 Broward County and 2030 Miami-Dade data that will be incorporated into the model to help us reflect our 2035 and 2085 model conditions. And then finally, as the third bullet states, the focus of this study is the primary system, of course, but we recognize that the secondary and tertiary system are of high importance. They provide storage. They really influence the peak discharge in the primary system. So we have included a very high level of detail in the model to cover these canal systems. And we're also adding the new and proposed extensions from both Miami-Dade County and Broward County Resiliency, again, to kind of bring the model up to the 2035, 2085 future conditions. Next slide, please. So changing gears a bit to the model input data, two major kind of components here that I'll cover. Rainfall. Again, this is an inland FRM, flood risk management study. So we will be doing event-based design storm simulations. So we are pulling that data from the NOAA Atlas 14 rainfall depths. We'll be spatially distributing them across the model domain and using South Florida Water Management District's 3-day distribution, which you can see on the right there. That distribution, it was pulled from their environmental resource permit applicant's handbook, which I've included here in case you guys want to review that reference, but it's used widely in a lot of stormwater and drainage studies and permitting in the area. So kind of commonplace use, felt like it's applicable for this study. In terms of the coastal boundary, we are going to be leveraging a really large effort that Jacksonville District and others undertook called the South Atlantic Coastal Study. That data, as part of the coastal hazard system, we'll be able to kind of use that to input a downstream surge condition in the model. And it's a result of numerical and probabilistic modeling that they performed in an AdCirc ST wave modeling domain. And you can kind of see the model domain in the lower left figure and all the storm events that were simulated in the lower right in order to provide us with the annual exceedance frequency results that again are going to be used as the downstream boundary condition. Next slide, please. Okay, compound flooding. I know it's a bit of a unique term. We are terming compound flooding for this study specifically as the total water level. So we are going to be looking at things like rainfall runoff, groundwater, and coastal forcings in our modeling effort. We recognize that compound flooding is important for the team to really understand the total risk and uncertainty needed to inform our plan formulation and design for this study. We are still kind of working through exactly the combination of events and the statistics behind that, but I do want to highlight that we're looking at including an array of rainfall and coastal events ranging from the 0.5 annual exceedance probability to the 0.002 annual exceedance probability, more commonly known as the 2-year through 500-year. So we are including quite a range of both forcings. Want to highlight that since this is an inland flood risk management study, we are not formulating risk reduction features specifically for coastal surge, but we recognize, its impact to the primary system and design, really due to, backwater effects and gate closures and things like that. So we wanted to capture that in the modeling. In terms of timing and how the rainfall and coastal events will be simulated, we are going to align the peaks of those events to provide a relatively conservative estimate, and we'll be simulating the time series for like 3 to 4 weeks following that peak of events. So that provides us with an understanding not only of the peak depth, but the duration of those depths, again, to inform some of possibly the performance metrics that we discussed today. Next slide. And finally, our climate change strategy is kind of twofold. We'll be looking at inland hydrology as well as sea level change. In terms of inland hydrology, we do conduct a pretty thorough literature review of the ongoing climate trends. And we also look at things like non-stationarities and kind of perform a desktop analysis of existing data in the area to see if there's any trends. In terms of the modeling, we will be running future extreme rainfall change factors as estimated by the 2022 USGS South Florida Water Management District study. And we will be running that on our tentatively selected plan. For sea level change, we are using the VACA key gauge, which is the closest compliant gauge to our study site. We'll be simulating and looking at sea level change impacts along one curve and performing sensitivity tests for the other curves. And then we'll also be assessing all 3 curves for our recommended plan. And that is really to help us inform the bottom bullet, which is the adaptation and mitigation strategy. Both sets of results will be used to, identify those strategies to incorporate for our recommended plans. And I think that's all I have. I think that's my last slide. Turn it over to, I think, Del and Eric are going to take over from economics now.
Morning, everybody. Eric Adamick with the Jacksonville District. I'm the lead economist on the study. I'm going to be talking about the accounts that we use to measure in our feasibility studies and our planning process. And then Del will come up and he'll talk a little bit about environmental justice. All right, so the 4 accounts, there's been a little bit of renewed importance on measuring things in the 4 accounts. We had a policy directive in January of 2021 from the Assistant Secretary of the Army requiring us to study at a minimum a no action alternative, a plan that maximizes net total benefits across all benefit categories, a plan that maximizes net benefits consistent with the study purpose, the NED plan. For FRM, like this study, a non-structural plan, that's something like relocation, acquisition, and then if desired by the non-federal sponsor, a locally preferred plan. And I'll get into what examples from each of the accounts, but it's the national economic development, the regional economic development, other social effects, and environmental quality. Next slide. So here we have our accounts. National economic development. These are losses to the nation. Obviously, this is one of the primary accounts that we measure. This is what what you typically see, damages reduced, things of that nature. Regional economic development is a little bit different. This is something that may be able to be picked up in another part of the country. So it's not a loss to the nation, but it is important to that specific region. Environmental quality obviously impacts on the environment, but this also includes things like cultural resources and their significance, other social effects. This could be human safety, life loss, social cohesion. There are several metrics that we have in this account. Next slide, please. All right, so here's some examples that we have. Like I mentioned, NED is our big one that we typically show. Damages prevented. There are other items, transportation cost savings. So this is if transportation networks are flooded, need to be rerouted. There's a loss to that. Emergency cleanup costs. There's debris after flood events or storms. You have to come in and clean that up. That's a loss to the nation. And then we have incidental recreation benefits, which I'm sure everybody in South Florida is pretty familiar with. And then we have the RED. So like I mentioned, these are the things that may be impacted that, can be picked up elsewhere in the nation, but lost locally and are important to the local community. These could be things like jobs created, wages supported, local tax revenue, that plays a big part in the community and the regional economy, and local business revenue. For other social effects, I talked about life safety, the population that's at risk from flood events. The quality of life is an important metric in the other social account. When we do talk about environmental justice, it's often under the umbrella of other social effects. It can play in some of the others, but mostly under other social effects. And then EQ, we can measure things like habitat units, acres restored, if there are cultural resources at risk, like I mentioned. And what's important to note too is, we just have, these are examples, and not all of them are possible to be measured within the scope of every study. And that's one of the major reasons that we're all here today, is to, come up with some of these metrics that can be used within this study. And one thing I want to mention real quick too, because I see some people filling out the RED sheet. We do have a lot of things on that page, and it's just to kind of get you thinking about the things that we may be able to measure, and to also if you have existing data, that's very important for us to kind of acquire and use in this study. So you don't necessarily have to fill out line by line, but if there is an item on there that you're familiar with and you do know of existing resources, please be sure to write it down on there. Next slide, please. Okay, and so there are different ways to measure things, right? You don't always have to quantify it. With the NED account, we will have a monetized effect that will quantify, but in the other accounts you don't always have to quantify. You don't want to fall into the quantification fallacy, right? We could do semi-quantitative, where we talk about a range. Ranges can be important, so we understand a magnitude of impact. We can do categorical. We can rank, assign importance. We could do plus and minuses, major impacts, major negative, major positive, and then we could do fully qualitative. This would just be a narrative example where we describe the impacts, describe how the alternatives affect those impacts. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm getting get some examples going that we have currently going on in the core. Indian River Lagoon South, this is an ecosystem restoration project. So the typical measurement here is habitat units. We had a fully measured habitat units, a selected plan, a recommended plan. But we had the opportunity to go back once the chief's report was signed, to go back and collect and do a benefits update. And we were required to collect some information about the benefits to tourism, recreation, water supply. So that's an example of one where we had a chief's report signed, but we did want to go back and we wanted to quantify impacts in these other 4 accounts and stress their importance as well, and comply with the policy directive. Next slide, please. Puerto Rico Coastal Feasibility Report. So this is something that's ongoing right now. We released a draft report already. And one of the reaches within this study was not economically justified. It's a disadvantaged community, high social vulnerabilities. So the benefit cost ratio was less than 1. The structural damages were not as high as the cost of any of the alternatives that we formulated. But there were very important impacts that were noted through our modeling. So you can kind of see all these red dots right along the coast here, showing the magnitude of damages. And what we developed was a criteria and a discussion about the impacts that it has on the community, having a, oh, sorry, we got a little pop up here. If you can close that for me. No, you're fine. Thanks. So we wanted to measure the impacts that would have beyond the structural damages, right? You would have this condition where these houses are falling into the ocean, they're condemned, it's a blighted community, nobody wants, nobody feels good living there, tourists don't want to come there, so it has this really negative impact beyond just the structural damages. So we actually quantified how often it would be the case that they would become condemned, and how our alternatives could relieve that blighted condition. And so once we did that, we needed to go and put forth an NED waiver based on this. So anytime that you are not recommending the plan that maximizes net economic development benefits or has a, is justified based on NED, you do need to have a waiver. Next slide, please. Within that same study, we had a different reach, which was justified at the time of creating this slide. There's a little uncertainty around that now, but it was fully justified to build a flood wall in this community that has a high level of flooding. But we still use the other 4 accounts to measure impacts from this flooding, right? There were business disruptions. This area has a thriving business community. They get flooded. There are many days in which they cannot produce revenue because of the flooding. So we measure the amount of days that they would be out of business and how our alternative affects that. In addition to that, there is a public housing complex within this area. It's one of the biggest in the Caribbean. And a lot of our benefits were attributed to that community. So what we did is we measured as a percentage of overall benefits, how much accrued to some of the most socially vulnerable in the area. And we created a metric for that. So we can look when we were looking at the different alternatives, which ones had the most percent of benefits that went to this socially vulnerable community. That's kind of consistent when we think about the EJ40 initiative. Next slide, please. Okay, so now getting kind of specific into performance metrics and how we might use them to compare alternatives and because it can be pretty daunting if you have a lot of different things that you're measuring. How do you compare them across a bunch of different alternatives? So this is just an example that we had from one of our projects where we used a multi-criteria decision analysis. And so basically what you did is you had all of these different performance metrics. They were scored based on however they were measured, and then they were normalized based on the maximum achievement of the score. And so what you're able to do by doing this is you can see which alternative maximizes each performance metric, and then you could see which alternative has the greatest benefit across all of them. You basically just take the area within the chart here, and I'll show you a table that shows the maximization in a couple slides. Next slide, please. And then the same thing applies to we just put it within those accounts that I talked about before. This is the USACE 4 accounts. Took the alternatives. How did they score in each one of the accounts? Which one maximized based on the 4 accounts. Next slide, please. And so that from that, you get this table. So on the left hand, the comprehensive score that relates back to the performance metrics and that radar plot, you just took the area within there and you could see which one maximized. In this case, it was alternative 5D. And then for the comprehensive or the 4 accounts, the total benefits plan, 5D also maximized within that. Next slide, please. All right, so key takeaways to this. We're required to, come up with plans that maximize benefits in the 4 accounts. And And as Tim mentioned, we have the tools for NED. This is that's our bread and butter. We know how to do that. We've got certified tools. That's our expertise. For the other 4 accounts, we do not have off-the-shelf tools for measuring impacts from flooding in those accounts. So we need some creativity. Existing data is great. Again, that's why we're here to come up with these things. The economists we all have a bunch of expertise in trade-off analysis, but we need some help in measuring the impacts and coming up with what's important. So close coordination with the vertical team, always relevant, and successful implementation, close coordination with the non-federal sponsor, and doing things like this here in this workshop. Next slide, and I think it's off for Dell. Yep, all for you. All right. Did you want me to answer Amy's question in the comment or at the end?
She got her hands up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, fine. Hi, everyone. My name is Del Kabash. I am the Environmental Justice Coordinator for the Army Corps of Engineers. And don't worry, everybody online, when I talk, everybody on Earth can hear me. Environmental justice, the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people regardless of race, color, and national origin. Basically, we want to make sure that no one group, especially the most socially vulnerable groups, bears the burden of any policy or any environmental project we put into place. We have multiple executive orders, especially ones by the current administration. It is now more of a major focus for the Corps of Engineers. So much so that they hired me to do it. So we have a couple of tools that we use to evaluate and determine whether certain communities and certain neighborhoods are what we call disadvantaged, or neighborhoods that we should look out for, but that we should evaluate more thoroughly. Next slide, please. So this is just an example for just Miami Springs, Florida, just one reach. Usually for our projects, some of them are more focused in area. So like, I'll show you on the next slide, but once we're doing for St. Augustine, there's a clear delineation, it's small scope, so I can see that this area is an environmental justice area within like our 3 neighborhoods. Whereas the challenge with this project is that there are environmental justice communities spread all throughout the coast. So what I would like to do, so instead of reaching out to all of these communities, what I would like to do is, I know that there are several non-government organizations within the area. There's also local government initiatives or local government departments that deal with that. So my goal for this is to more or less coordinate with them and then try to figure out a combined strategy for that. This is the EPA's EJ community screen tool, so we can look at certain neighborhoods, certain census tracts, or in this case, we created a shape file so we can look at things like low income, what percentage of the community is considered low income, people of color, and then other social effects to help us determine whether or not an area is socially disadvantaged by definition. Next slide, please. And then another tool we use is the Explore the Map tool. This is the area. This is just an example, a simple, straightforward example of just an area we use for environmental justice. So this is for our St. Augustine project, and this is more of a simple, straightforward. It's west of what is the Santa Fe River. For those of you who are not familiar with North Florida, it's considered socially disadvantaged based on things like proximity to pollutants and other factors. So, and as Eric mentioned before, the non-NED accounts, so especially this one, it's going to be more qualitative. So, and there's not really a quantitative approach to that, which is my long-term goal, is to determine a way to quantify this. But what we need to do, what we are looking for is to determine, we want to figure out from people in these communities how our projects are going to affect them and things they are worried about and their concerns. And our main goal for environmental justice is to make sure that these communities have a seat at the table and that they are involved in the process going forward. Next slide, please. This is for my counterpart with South Florida Water Management District. This is Nicole Cortez.
Thanks, Del. Hello, everyone. So thanks for the intro. I am Nicole Cortez. I work at the South Florida Water Management District in the Resiliency office. Pertaining to this study specifically that we're partnering on with the Corps, I support all of our stakeholder engagement along with the project managers and other project delivery team members. And then, as Del mentioned, I'm the counterpart on informing environmental justice, which kind of goes by other names. And so I'm also up here to share a few different tools that we've already started to kind of use and integrate into our own planning processes at the district. So I'm just going to start by really sharing 3 additional tools in addition to EJ Screen, kind of talk about what data they really are based on, and then what their application is, like what do they really inform us on. And then, as Del said, what we really want with these is to use them as a basis to start with something. They're not what we're going to use as metrics, but they're helpful information that could help us start a discussion on what potentially should be considered, what is available, and then more importantly, what's not there, because these are federal data sets. So what can we bring to the table to really leverage this already helpful data and make it even more robust when it comes to applying it to a project that would be occurring locally in our communities. So I'm going to start with this tool right here. This is probably the most common, and truly it's the basis for many of the other tools that I'll go over. It's the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. This is really based on the American Community Survey, or the US Census. Really what it looks at is demographic data and economic data. So it characterizes the people in a household, families, and then their economic status. So I'm just going to from now on say socioeconomic when I'm discussing demographics and economy. And then what this tool really does is it ranks vulnerability. It doesn't necessarily say this is an environmental justice community. It really ranks it, like if you think about percentages. Next slide, Jenny, please. Thank you. And then we have another tool who also uses some CDC data, also uses, in addition to CDC data, it uses like legacy data. So like, for example, is a community near a historical Superfund site? Or it might look at something like, is it near a place that has underground storage tanks that have added to pollution? So it's actually looking both at now that socioeconomic data plus economic factors, plus legacy factors. And what this really does, instead of ranking a community on a scale, it actually identifies it as disadvantaged if it falls within any one of 8 categories that are for this tool. What I really love about this tool is that it shows, so there's 8 maps, and these are the 8 categories. You don't need to be in more than one category to be identified as disadvantaged. Just within one, then the community is disadvantaged. But what's really interesting about it, as you can see, the colors kind of are different in different places. Like the blue has more in Southeast Florida, but then let's say you look at the energy category, and that's more like in Central Florida, just north and south of Lake Okeechobee. So I think what this really shows is that as diverse as our communities are regionally and even locally, so are the risks that they're facing. So are the hardships that they endure. And so this is one more data set that we can look at to really inform what our communities are up against and how our projects can be beneficial to them as well. Next, Jenny. Thank you. This is the last tool. This is the FEMA NRI tool. So this one looks at, again, socioeconomic data. All of these tools really do use the CDC's SVI as their basis. But then it kind of cross-analyzes that with 2 things. Number 1, hazard exposure. So it looks at risks. As you can see, all of Southeast Florida is red because we are at risk for, I think it's like 5 of the 18 categories, which are like hurricanes, surge, tornadoes, wind, like a bunch of different things. So I think this is a tool that, unlike the other one that says, oh, look, there's diversity within our risk, there's also kind of a situation where you end up with like, well, what do you do when the whole community is flagged as disadvantaged or at risk or exposed. And then in addition to that, it looks at community resilience data. I think that's something that is, not talked about enough. That's really where we say, well, how resilient is the community? Does it have all the things that it needs to bounce back in terms of infrastructure? Do the residents all have access to the same kind of things? Is knowledge for preparedness really spread? I'm from Miami, and if many of you are here, if you are, you know that like my mom could not read something in English if I told her about hazard exposure. She'd say, "¿Qué? What are you talking about?" So this is really all these tools together, as we can see, will give us different information that we can kind of leverage to inform the projects. And then back to application, this one doesn't identify a community as disadvantaged. It also doesn't rank it right on a percentile statistically. Instead, it talks about relative risk. So when we say relative risk, it basically says the communities in the very high category are just at a relatively very high risk compared to the communities in the moderate category. It's all based on an algorithm. I won't get into all of that, but what we'll do during the upcoming session, and I know Gus will go over kind of the instructions, is we'll have an opportunity to really look at this. We won't be using it as data, but then our goal is to look at it more closely and say, okay, what can we add here? How is this helpful? And then from there, develop the metrics of what do we need to look at? How do we need to look at? And what do we exactly calculate? And I think I'm done. Yeah. Oh,
That's neat.
sorry, can I say one more thing?
Go for it.
I forgot to say this. So if you do want to find out more about these, because these slides are, 3 slides that I'm going over very heavy data sets in the South, in the South Florida Water Management District's Sea Level Rise and Flood Resiliency Plan, Chapter 8. Look me, I can send you an email with the link. We actually go over each one, and there's a table for like what all information is looked at for each of these data sets and under each category that it calculates. Okay, really yours.
Sure.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, my last slide. So we're part of Jacksonville district. So we work with non-federal and partners. We work with communities. I've gone down to Puerto Rico. I've worked in St. Augustine, and now I'm working here, trying to incorporate the communities there into our projects. And then we also have a tribal liaison who works closely with the Miccosukee and Seminole tribes. And then South Florida also has a tribal liaison who works with other tribes as well. So as I said before, what we're looking for here in this workshop is we're looking to identify issues that we probably would not have thought of before, trying to think of ways that maybe our project will benefit these communities. Look at some ways maybe there's some concerns that we can look out for. Again, this is just not something where we promise that we take everything into action, but this is more of a thing that we want to hear everybody's opinion so that we have all the information possible so we can make the best decisions that we can while taking environmental justice into account. And I think I am done. Cool.
All right, thank you. We're going to start our breakout sections. For the folks online, Jenny. What's today? Okay, hey, Sam. Right, I get you. All right. Okay, we are going to start our breakout sections for the folks online. We have Jennifer Smith, our Zoom moderator, and senior project manager from South Florida. So she and my chief, Sulamet Vega Liriano, will be helping to facilitate our virtual part of the meeting. For the folks here in the room, you already select the table, right? We have 4 reaches. Each reach we're going to go to the slide. Go to the next slide. Oops. All right. So each week we're going to discuss the account. All right. All right. Let's start. or objective. We trace our plan formulation, but based in all objective. Just keep that in mind. It's as I mentioned, and 14 mentioned, it's a global. Risk management study, right? So let's keep. So we have the four reaches. Each table we'll be discussing the three accounts. And let's go to what? Next slide, please. Okay. I want you to in each table assign a leader. So each table will be assigning a leader. That leader is going to what?
Yeah, at the end of the computer. You're gonna stand over there.
We saw the room. We can search for the room.
Yeah, but they're all listening to what you're saying.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so each table we have to select a leader, right? At the and we will have 25 minutes to discuss each account. We start with regional economic development. It's next other social effects, and we end with environmental quality. At the end of the 25-minute discussion for each account, I would like to everybody in each table to have a kind of summary by 5 minutes for each account. Next slide, please. So we will be taking home this process and all the information that you provide today. We'd like to have some preliminary performance metrics, as some of the team members mentioned. We are not going to use all of that, right? But at least we need to listen from you, what is important to you. So you have some material in your tables, and please write it down, mark on the maps. We have easel pads in there to brainstorm all that information, and we would like to take that to process. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Okay, at the end of the discussion, we have a general discussion for each table. So the table leader will be presenting to the in this room what the more significant findings that you discuss in each table. So we will have discussion for one of the each reaches at the end, like a summary, and at the end we will have a recap and next steps. And that's it. And slides, please. And, we have a sign. We have a sign of the member from the local next table. Eric, you are assigned to table A. Oh, you can't.
Take a break on connection.
We're gonna, no, I don't think so. How do I mute this? Thank you. You see my?
Very well. Okay.
What'd it do?
All right, is everyone hearing me?
So he says he sees some hands raised.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. So my name is Jenny Smith. I am the lead project manager for the resiliency study for the South Florida Water Management District. We are entering our Jamboard sessions. So this is the first breakout session for RED, so Regional Economic Development. So if everyone can see the link that was just posted in the chat and click on that link, it will bring you to this Google Jamboard session. Anyone have problems with the link, or can you see it? So make sure that if you do highlight any of these boxes, do not delete. You can move them around, but we'd like them to stay put. But if you go to the left and click on this text T box or the sticky note box, you can put anything you want on these pages. You can put your thoughts, notes. If you do put a sticky note or text on your thoughts on these pages, just let us know. Yeah, don't delete. Just let us know what your name is or your contact information or what agency, company, who you work with or for. At the very top, you can look through the
Good morning.
pages.
Good
Hi.
morning. Jenny. I'm so sorry. This is Sulamet. I just want to let you know that we're just seeing the breakout session slide. So if you're sharing, if you're talking from the Jamboard, we cannot see it online.
Ah, thank you. Let me just make sure I'm clicking on the right share. All right. Do we see Google Jamboard now? The RED, Regional Economic Development, is on the top left. What do you need?
Not yet, ma'am.
Resume share.
Okay, I just stopped the share. So try it again.
Ah, okay. We're having issues. Screen share. Workshop.
We have it now.
Ooh, excellent. I see that. All right. So let's go over this again. So the slides up top, we can go through the questions for regional economic development, just to get the conversation going. There are maps associated with each reach. So reach A, B, C, D, and E. So you can put a sticky note on the left-hand menu here. And if you do put a sticky note somewhere on the page, just put your name and contact information and your thoughts. We also have a text box that you can add text in on any of these pages. So just, I would ask that if you do click on a box or a map to make sure that you do not delete it. But this is a page, and all these pages you can post to, and we can get your thoughts, your questions, your recommendations. And at the end of the meeting, we will quantify all of these thoughts and recommendations. And yes, you can draw. And everything will be organized, evaluated, and determined if your ideas can be utilized, if there's something that we're missing as far as our data or locations of data that we didn't know about. Your input is greatly appreciated. And let me know if you have any problems with this Jamboard. If you have questions, we may or may not be able to answer the questions if it's a modeling question or an economics question, but if you post them here, we can get back to you. There's also a resiliency email that questions can be posted to.
Hey, Jenny, this is Lamet. I just want to show something really quick. One example. I'm not sharing the screen, Jenny is, but this tool is so great. that you're going to be able to see kind of this demo on the fly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and from the Jamboard on page 1, I will be adding a sticky note. And I will, when you click on the sticky note, you're going to be able to pick a color. If you want to make this fun, you can pick an actual color. You have an option of yellow, green, blue, pink, and orange. So I will go ahead and use pink for myself. You can write your name is Jenny mentioned. So in my case, I'm just going to put for now because this is a demo. I will just add my initials, and you will see popping up in the screen. As soon as you save your sticky note, you're going to be able to click cancel. And then you're going to be able to move your sticky note around as I'm doing right now. And another good thing is that you're going to be able to change the size by picking and dragging the corner sticky note. So you can see my initials there moving from size to size. So if you want, now that you have your name, you can click on the top right. There's 3 dots on your sticky note. You can click on those 3 dots and it will give you a menu, or either edit your sticky note, duplicate your sticky note, delete it, or change the order. Because we're going to have multiple people in the Jamboard, a sticky note might be behind another sticky note. So you can change the priority, like bringing the sticky note forward or backward as um, fitting your needs. So in this case, I'm clicking on editing and I will add hello. Just so you guys can see like how the sticky note can change. So this is just an example. Please note that as Jenny pointed out at the top, right now for this Jamboard, there's 14 pages. So this first page is really to give you an example on the performance matrix that everyone in the person workshop is seeing. And you can go ahead and provide any of the performance metrics that you see could be applicable for this particular study. And you can move your sticky note to the right or to a place that is not basically blocking anybody's sticky notes. So you can move it around. I just wanted to highlight that, Jenny, for everyone's awareness.
Thank you, Zulamet. You are the expert on the Jamboard. We do have 30 minutes for this session. And like I said, there's a page for questions too, that please put your thoughts in. And then pages for maps for each reach. So you can make your comments specific to each reach on that reach page with the map. So there are different maps that show different things for regional economic development. So feel free to explore each page in this breakout session for RED. So you have 30 minutes. Let me know in the chat if you have questions. I can probably try and get someone over if you need some specialty questions answered. But questions can be posted to this Jamboard as well, and they can be answered later if you put your contact information in. So I am going to mute myself unless someone pipes in with a question or if they have issues with Jamboard. It's really loud in here.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I also would like to add, just because Jenny has one of the maps shown on the Jamboard, this is an opportunity of looking at these preliminary maps and looking at some of the data that the team has put together so far. And if you have any other thoughts also on other data that you would like to see displayed for future references, please add that as well. Maybe in a not in a sticky note, or maybe on a text note or something like that. Any input that you guys provide will be collected and will be used for the purpose of this study. So we do appreciate all your input, and take this opportunity to take this basically sneak peek on the preliminary data that the team has put together for these maps, and provide additional input on what you would like to see for these kind of maps in the future. Thank you.
We do have some hands raised. Adam Friedman, do you have a question? I don't know if participants are able to unmute themselves. Can you post it into the chat?
Hey, Jenny, while we wait on that response, I'm seeing that in the first page of the Jamboard, there's a couple of sticky notes saying that the chat is disabled within the Zoom. So perhaps that's why we're seeing a lot of hands. Perhaps they want to share a comment.
Okay.
In
Nicole
Zoom.
said if I say their name out loud, she can allow them to unmute. So Adam Friedman, can we unmute him?
Hello, yes, Adam Friedman here.
Yay!
Thank you for unmuting. That was my comment, was the chat was disabled. Might just have some quick questions that other people can benefit from.
Okay.
Just looking for a little bit more direction on the Jamboard, where to put it. I'm with One Print 3D printing green gray infrastructure, and I'm putting my post-it a couple places that I have interest in. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Yes, thank you. All right, Chris LaPrade. Can we unmute? Or Charles, I'm sorry. Charles Are we able to unmute him? Miss Nicole? I cannot unmute him. They will still have to
Sorry,
unmute themselves.
I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Okay. No worries. I think that's only 2 hands raised. Anyone else have questions?
So Jenny, while we wait on additional comments, I would like to address Adam's question really quick. So for example, this is an exercise that is more of like a do your own kind of thing. So you're going to be able to provide your feedback at your own pace. So right now, Jenny has in the screen page number 2 of this actual Jamboard. And right now, what we're showing is a questionnaire that the in-person public is also, or attendees are also seeing. So if you have any feedback, for example, on what do we currently understand about the socioeconomics impacts of flooding, you can add a sticky note right there with your name and just highlight that you're answering question number 1 and adding your feedback. The same with the following, the next questions. For example, we're trying to get some input on how do we measure this from an RED perspective. If you have any ideas, if any of you has any ideas on how to include some input to question number 2, you can do the same. Place a sticky note and add some thoughts. The same with number 3. is one of the questions in that blog is, how does flooding impact local tax revenues? And this is something really important and could be very useful if there's existing information on the matter. Our economic team and the team in overall can take that information and translate it into a metric that we can track for the purposes of evaluation and comparison of alternatives. The same with question number 4. One of the questions on that blog is, how does flooding impact the willingness of the community or investors to invest, develop, fix frequent flooded areas? So if you have any input with that regard, you can do the same. Jenny, if we can go to page number 3, perhaps we can discuss a little bit the gist of this Jamboard. Thank you very much. So again, we have a questionnaire in here. We have questions 5 to 8. On number 5, one of the questions from the blog, and now I'm going to pick from the middle. Are any local records maintained to quantify impacts in terms of annual average income? So if you have any of this data, this is the page for you. Please feel free to add a sticky note and add information with that regard. Just highlighting that you're providing input to question number 5. Question number 6 on this particular page is, how do transportation impact affects in economics? Like how access to business is impacted. This is very important in basically transportation itself. There's a lot of benefits that can be claimed in a study for a plan. So if we have any of that specific information based on your local knowledge and your local experience, you can add a sticky note there on adding that additional information. And I would want to add too, if you don't have the information handy, just keep this question in mind. And if you know where to find the information, but you don't have an actual answer or a specific input for a question, if you have a link, just add a sticky note with reference number to the question and copy that link, and we will look at it and see what information we can find from that link. There's also another question in here, number 7, in terms of municipal counties, universities that perhaps have information on quantifying the economic impacts of flooding. This is a really good one and very important one. If there's any existing information on how to quantify economic impacts as a result of any of the flooding events that have happened in the area, that's your spot to provide that type of input. Number 8, we have another question related to, have cost-benefit analysis been performed for recent grant proposals? Are those results relevant to this study? So if you know of any specific cost-benefit analysis that have been done to justify or post any grants, feel free to add that information. We can use it not only as direct input, but as an example on things we can do for this study. So that's basically the type of input that we're requesting for that type of questionnaires. And then, as Jenny showed, the following Jamboards, for example, in page 4, is showing Reach A. as a whole, we know the area is very big, and perhaps the Jamboard is not that interactive that you can zoom in and out of a map. So that's why we have added slide 5 and 6 after this one, which is more a zoom in perspective on the same reach. So focusing on reach A, the north side, and reach A, the south side. So if you have any particular input on those areas, perhaps some of the input in the questionnaire. So let me provide an example here. So, and this is totally made up. In we are right now, Jenny is on slide 6. So if you know of any cost benefit reports, and again, this is made up, for the region of Plantation, for example, you can put a sticky note in here and say, refer to cost benefit analysis reference provided in slide 2 for the Plantation area. So something like that, or perhaps a matrix in specifically for the RED. It could be one of the examples that our economist Eric Adamek provided during his talk, or it could be another proposal. So that's basically the input that we're requesting. So slide 4, 5, and 6 are the same reach A. Slide 7 is reach B. So that is a little bit more of a smaller footprint. So we just have one slide for that one. Slide 8 is reach C. And slide 9, we have done the same as for reach A, in which we have like an regional perspective, like the overall reach D, and then 2 additional slides with zoom in views of reach D. And then after that, all the blank slides are really created. If you keep clicking to the right, there's going to be a continuation, like you're going to be adding and adding pages to the Jamboard. So that's okay. There's no wrong with that. We're going to be able to identify those blank sheets and kind of delete it from the data collection, but you can add on those blank slides perhaps any particular maps that you have that you will want to share with us. If you want to identify a specific region within a region that gets flooded, you can provide that spatial extent of that flooding on those blank maps. So at the end of the slide, there's more free will on what type of information you can provide. But we're open to any feedback. We're here to learn from you, to gather as much information as we can, so we develop matrices that will help us identify in the future a recommended plan for this region that we all feel is really adding for the reduction of flood risk in these areas. So
Thank
Jenny,
you
I
so
give it back
much.
to you.
Yes.
Are there any like hands?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay.
No one has any questions, but thank you so much. You are amazing.
No, my pleasure. No, this is, again, we're all here to learn from all of you, and we're really looking forward for that feedback. if any of you want to bring something into discussion, like a matrix, if you're unsure whether or not it's a good recommendation or a bad recommendation, I will say to everyone that any recommendation is good. So in my purview, there's no good or wrong. But if you want to discuss it in the general forum, feel free to raise your hand and we'll do our best to unmute you so we can chat a little bit more.
All right, we do have a hand up. Sarah Belmont. Mr. Devon, can you unmute Sarah Belmont and then she can unmute herself after? So Sarah, you should be able to see, you can unmute yourself in just a moment here. There you go. There you are.
Muted now?
We can hear you.
Okay, and I apologize. I'm sure that this is something that you said. Unfortunately, I had a conflict I couldn't get out of, so I missed the first part of this. But what is the red? And I can't read it on my screen, and I can't enhance it enough to actually read what the colors go with. What are the green down here in this image that you're showing? The green and the red colors in the bottom and the blue.
Which page are you asking
One
about?
that you're showing right now.
Oh, the one I'm showing right now?
Yeah,
So,
the red colors, like the large in the southeast, the large red. I'm at Biscayne National Park, by the way. I'm not at Everglades National Park.
These maps are just a snipping to kind of show you what data we have and what we're using. It does not blow up very well. It's still very pixelated if I try and blow it up.
It's fine. I just wondered what the red and the blue and the green stand for.
So Jenny, I might be able to help a little bit. I think that the green is highlighting agricultural areas. I could be wrong, but that's what I was able to read from the legend. And then from the red, my understanding is like commercial lands. But we'll definitely make sure the legends are bigger. And we can definitely double check that information for you, Sarah.
And so you're asking for comments, which I assume that our agency is going to give you.
Yes, any comment on matrices that we can track under the regional economic development, and how to measure are definitely the focus for this workshop. But in addition, if you have any comments regarding the maps that have been displayed, or additional data that you would like to see in future presentations, and or data that you might have available and we are not showing in these maps, feel free to add that information as well.
I can try to stop sharing my Jamboard screen and go to this map in its original source. I have it, but then I'd have to get out of Jamboard.
That's fine.
So if you need a copy of this map, I can send it to you.
That'd be awesome.
Okay. Can you put that request in the, oh, you can't do the chat. Put it in the sticky note. And
well, you have my name, so
that's true.
You can just email it to me if you can get around to it.
Okay.
I'm sure somebody in our group must have it, but if you could send it to us, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, Sarah, our pleasure. And if there's any comments related to the legend or what type of data we're displaying, feel free to add a sticky note, and we can definitely get back to you. I'm just gonna start to look at the sticky notes that we have, Jenny, and see if we can bring any of the topics. But before I do that, can I do like a check on time? How are we
Yeah.
doing on time?
We do have
Maybe.
more hands raised as well. I wanted to get
Okay.
to.
Perfect.
Chris LePrad. Mr. Devon, can we unmute Chris? And then he can unmute himself. All right, Chris? Or Charles, I keep calling you Chris. I'm so
Yes.
sorry. My screen is very small, very, very small. Thank you, Charles.
No problem. And I don't mind, it's fine. My question was also with the map that is showing, and before y'all moved it around a little bit, I was able to blow it up with my phone on the legend. And it's not a correct representation on land use in the area. And you may want to look at the Miami-Dade County's newly released ag study that came out that was done by UF that has better representation, especially on things outside the urban development boundary line, which a lot of this is down south. So just so y'all know, red is showing as commercial. And I'm guessing that for some reason we have all of our foliage nurseries listed as commercial on this map as opposed to agriculture when they're agriculture and not commercial. And I'm not sure what I'm guessing that's rock mining there in the southeast and the model lands and all that, that's commercial. Because I don't know of anything there, nor the ag in that area. There's not any, but I wasn't able to see what the blue meant, but I could see what the green and the red was. And it's not really indicative of what's on the ground in a lot of places.
Okay, I have on my list to send you the maps as well, Charles.
Thank you.
Sarah Belmont. Mr. Devon, can we unmute Sarah? Go ahead, Sarah.
And the green in that bottom area that Charles was pointing out is listed that way because it's a large part of that is owned by Florida Power and Light. And most of that is a mitigation bank, actually. So I don't think that any of that's going to be developed, or at least it is. I don't know, but they're from Dade County who could speak to that, but and the district, but and Charles probably. But those are definitely the mitigation bank that's there.
Right, Miss Carol Ballard. Devon, can we unmute Carol Ballard? All right, Carol. Carol, you'll have to unmute yourself as well. I think we lost her. All right, well, I have been notified that this concludes our RED session. Oh, there you are, Carol. Yes, ma'am. All right, Carol, were you going to say anything? Okay, I guess we do not have anything from Carol at the moment. So this concludes our regional economic development discussion. The Jamboard link should still work. I'm going to send out the next Jamboard link. This will be a completely different link in the chat. You will be able to click on the slides created for OSE. So I am putting in the chat now as we speak.
And Jenny, just to add, I was able to add a sticky note just for our general knowledge about the comment Mr. Charles LePrat made and Sarah Belmont. just to track those items.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I have it written down as well. But putting them on the Jamboard, your thoughts, your questions, they'll be easily tracked and addressed as well. All right. Did everyone get the new link to the other Jamboard session, the OSE?
So I'm seeing that people are joining. So we have a little bit more than about 20 people now joining.
Excellent. Can everyone see my screen as well? The OSE Jamboard screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. And the link came through okay?
Yes, I was able to see it.
Perfect. All right, so very similar format from the last one. This deals with environmental justice.
So this is
And
other social effects.
Other social effects. Yes.
Yep.
So we have our questions to get the thought process going. So review the questions and please put input, your thoughts, questions, any recommendations. We also have maps. So the maps that Nicole Cortez and Dell went over. So the CDC social vulnerability, I can't speak, social vulnerability index. There's the FEMA National Risk Index maps. The regional disadvantaged communities by category maps. And everything is by reach. So please put in your input or comments and feel free to answer questions. Put in your thoughts. So we have, I think we're running a little behind. I think we have about 15 to 20 minutes for this session. I will let you know. And again, raise your hand if you have questions and I can get Devon to unmute everyone.
Thank you, Jenny. So for this one, as Jenny mentioned, is the same framework. The first page has the performance matrix worksheet in which you can provide input on any specific matrix that you would like to recommend. We consider for other social effects, and also you can provide any input on what to measure and how to measure. That's really important for the purposes of this exercise, and that's in slide number 1. In slide number 2 that Jenny is showing in the screen right now, there's some questions to start kind of your, the conversation going or your thoughts going. The first question that we have is, do these data set maps accurately reflect the full extent of socioeconomic vulnerabilities and community challenges within your communities in the context of flood risk? So if the answer is yes or no, or there's some information, but I would like to see other information, feel free to add a sticky note indicating so and highlighting that your comment is specifically for question number 1. For question number 2, the question that has been posed is, are there any aspects of your community's vulnerabilities and challenges that are not adequately represented in these maps? So if you have any specific aspect that has not been covered or captured in any of the maps that we have, the CDC, the FEMA, or the regional vulnerability in the regional disadvantaged communities maps, just feel free to add input there for the purposes of this exercise. And if you have any specifics, please provide any examples or descriptions so we can track it. The third question there that we have here in this sheet is, how have your communities historically been affected by flooding? And have there been any recent changes or trends in these impacts that are not reflected in the data? So again, this is looking at the maps and any impact, any input in terms of historical communities. If you cannot see a specific historical community highlighted in any of these maps, and you have that knowledge, feel free to share it by placing a sticky note and adding that additional information. And I love it. I'm seeing some sticky notes popping up. So thank you very much for those that are starting to provide some input. Really appreciate it. We have the third question. How have your, well, that's the one that we went through. Fourth question is, are there any local initiatives, resources, or community strengths that the maps do not capture but are essential in your community's approach to flood resilience and environmental justice? If you have any particular input on this matter, feel free to add additional information, and please add into your sticky note perhaps what question you're addressing. It will be easier for us to track when we compile the information. We have in slide number 3 4 additional questions. Question number 5 is, what specific actions or strategies do you believe should be prioritized as part of regional flood resilience planning to address the unique environmental justice concerns of your communities? So if you know of any perhaps current efforts, strategies, actions that should be prioritized as part of flood resilience, let us know. And if you have any particular environmental justice community, any particular community identified, please feel free to add additional information there. So just very randomly, I see that there's 2 sticky notes, so I'm just going to read this out loud just because we were in question number 5, and just to make this a little bit more interactive. I'm seeing a sticky note here, which is addressing comment number 5. And again, this is totally random. How will low-income neighborhoods be protected from being bought out after storm, flooding events? Can't afford to build back to new building codes. So that's a comment that has been added as additional information in terms of question number 5, for example. So thank you very much for providing that additional information. We have comment or question number 6. Have there been any community-led efforts or partnerships that should be considered in the study to enhance environmental justice in the context of flood risk? If you know of any community-led efforts, please let us know. You can add a sticky note with your name and the number of the question you're addressing. We're encouraging name just for the purposes of documentation, but if you want to provide input anonymously, you can do that as well. Number 7, how do cultural factors such as language, awareness, and or access to knowledge about preparedness and resources impact your community's ability to respond to flood risk? And how should these considerations be integrated into our resiliency strategy? Um, oh, that's perfect. So one sticky note just pop out and is referencing this question number 7. So um, not sure if the thought is completely finished there, but we do want to recognize that some of these communities within our study area are Spanish speaking communities. That's definitely an aspect of the socioeconomics that we want to consider in the process of this study. Number 8, are there any potential unintended consequences or negative impacts or typical flood resilience measures on vulnerable communities that we should be aware of and mitigate? This is another area that we would like input into. And I see that the same comment as of number 5 was added for number 8 in this case. And as the previous Jamboard for red, the next slides are maps per reaches. In this particular case, for the other social events, as Jenny went through, there's 3 different type of maps per reach. So slide 4 through 6 will be referencing reach A, but with looking at 3 different data sources for the purpose of the mapping. Is the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. We have the FEMA National Risk Index, and we also have the regional disadvantaged communities. Slides 7 through 9 are focused on reach B. Slides 10 through 12 are reach C. And slides 13 through 15 are reach D. And again, following the same type of maps, feel free to add any specific comments if you're seeing something, if you're noticing something on a specific map product. Let us know, give us some feedback. What are we missing? Are you do you know of any vulnerable socioeconomic vulnerable community that is not being highlighted in any of these maps? I think that's a very fair question and something that it will be much appreciated if we have some input about it. If there's any communities that are not being highlighted in any of these maps. And again, going back to the purpose of this section, we are really looking forward for performance metrics and ideas and what to measure and how to measure. So we're seeing 2 sticky notes here. So there are questions. So I will take it like a raise of hand. There's one that says, are larger interactive maps available to view? And I will answer that we don't have a larger interact map here in this platform in Jamboard, but we can definitely, if you provide your contact information, we should be able to share some of these maps with you, so you can review it on your own time and provide additional input as needed. Jenny, will you like to add anything else to that comment?
No, but you bring up a good point with these performance metrics. So each of these Jamboard slides will have a little performance metrics page here. And one of the difficult things with all of these accounts is how to measure some of these issues. How do you calculate it? How do you quantify it? Is there a metric that we are missing as far as measuring some of these issues? What is your recommendation on how to measure? Is there a threshold? What's your proposed measurements in other ways? Or in your agency, do you measure some of these things and how do you do it? So the performance metrics recommendations or thoughts is very important as well. I didn't harp on that enough, I think, on the other page. So definitely put your thoughts here on the performance metrics page as well on how to quantify some of these issues or how they're already being quantified that we may not be aware of. But that is the only other thing. Carol Ballard has a question. Devon, can you please unmute her?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh gosh, it worked this time. Thanks.
Yay.
Yeah, so yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate, Zulamed has said it, but like it looks like a lot of this data that's being presented is on it from a national level. And so that's what I think is important here to reach out and see if there's any studies on a local level about these communities, because it might be something that we could compare to some of the national data, right? Isn't that what you're kind of looking for? Because I was thinking a lot of the national data may not have the same level of detail as maybe a local study or something. And I was thinking that was what I was kind of going to add about the previous two when they were talking about economics. Was the same thing. Then you may have more information on like tourism, loss of tourism in certain areas, and those kind of costs. So I don't know. That was just my comment.
Yes, exactly. So we have our different resources that we've been provided as far as national maps and high level maps. But if there are any other studies or maps available for smaller areas, for regions, for municipalities that may not have them posted on a website or readily available or not incorporated into these national maps, yes, that's definitely something we'd like to review and incorporate into the study if possible.
And then the other thing, Jenny, sorry to take up a little time, but the other thing I was going to answer too about Reach D, a lot of those areas, I couldn't see the legend. It was too small. So I don't know what the colors were, but right, there's like an urban development boundary, and a lot of those areas to the south and even to the west, a lot of the western areas are agriculture. And then a lot of the areas to the south are wetlands and natural areas. And so I just wanted to comment too on the how many tidal structures, because there's around 5 major tidal structures in that reach, from starting at S22, S123, and then S197 is the one in the Everglades National Park. So there's about 5 major ones and a couple of smaller structures also. So that reach, maybe if you have information about more detailed information about, the agricultural areas and the economic losses, or any kind of studies for the agricultural areas or something might be helpful. Wouldn't be included in the national information necessarily. So, okay, thank you. Over.
And Jenny, thank you, Carol, for those comments and that additional information. I want to highlight that there's another question here in this page about receiving, like sending comments, written comments separately. So I have added as an answer to send additional comments. Like we will prefer Jamboard, like if you add the comment here definitely will be tracked as part of kind of the live workshop. But in your spare time, if other comments come to mind, or if you don't have the data available handy right now, feel free to add information to our core email, which I added in that sticky note where the comment was posted. So just wanted to highlight that.
So that sticky note that has Zulamed's Army Corps email is on slide 1, if people are on different slides. We have a question. Mr. Devon, can you unmute Charles LaPrade? Charles.
Hi. So again, and now that we have the email for contact, I don't know if that's a good place for me to send the county's recently completed agricultural study. So on the value and number of employees and all that on agriculture and the threats. It's a very large 400 and something page study. So I don't know if you want me to send it to, but that could clear up a lot of this. It also includes a lot of maps on land use.
Okay. You can send it there, or I can get with you later.
Okay, that's
and
fine.
You can send it. I can send a link if it's that huge, OneDrive link, or send it some other way.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
I wrote it down as an action item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have another 4 minutes for this session before we go to the next. So please wrap up your comments. All right, you all should be getting the next link for the environmental quality Jamboard session. And we'll switch over momentarily.
Jenny, I just want to highlight that we receive a lot of good information on page 2, 3. So appreciate everyone that have been able to provide input and answering those questions. So thank you. I just want to appreciate, like, say out loud how we appreciate your input. So thank you very much for taking the time and providing that additional information.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to pause sharing for a moment and pull up the environmental quality Jamboard session. All right, everyone should see my environmental quality Jamboard session on the share screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So we do have just several questions on environmental quality. This may not be a full list of questions. There's a lot to environmental quality, but this will get the discussion going. Exactly how will environmental quality be affected? What should we be monitoring? What impacts to environmental quality there may be? What can we track? What can we measure? What are the metrics for environmental quality? And of course, as the other Jamboard sessions showed, there are definite maps in each of these showing the flood resiliency in each reach. And I don't think these are any specific data maps. No, they're just the reaches. So, Dulamet, if you wanted to go over the questions, I thought that was a very good discussion. And it's
Sure,
very
no,
loud here. I
absolutely.
can't hear very well, and you did great.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And I see that we have more than 11 people that have already joined us into this environmental quality Jamboard. So again, appreciate you for sticking up in these breakout sessions and providing input. So as Jenny mentioned, similar layout as the other two Jamboards. We have the performance matrix and what to measure, how to measure in page 1. But for this discussion, we're focusing on page number 2 and just highlighting the 3 questions that we're posting right now. Again, these questions are not exclusive. So if you have any additional input that could help us filling out potential metrics that we can look into within environmental quality, please feel free to add. So just to start the discussion, question number 1, we have it here, and it says, where are environmentally sensitive areas in this region that should be monitored for flooding impacts and salinity intrusion? And I think I want to highlight that for that particular question, you need to be thinking on the 4 different regions that we have. So we're not just highlighting one region versus the other. Is if you have knowledge, local knowledge on flooding impacts and salinity intrusion magnitudes or any other data, feel free to add a sticky note, reference question number 1, and perhaps highlight if the input is for reach A, reach B, C, D, or all of them. So we will appreciate all your feedback. The second question is, are there areas you suspect saltwater intrusion is already occurring? This is a good, definitely a good question, because it's covering
I lost Sulamet. Did everyone else lose her as well? Well, I can continue. I did want to bring up that environmental quality also discusses impacts to habitat, acres, which may or may not be able to be restored after a storm event. How are areas going to be restored for resiliency? Any species risk or species loss? Cultural resource impacts or cultural resource losses, or possible critical habitat created or destroyed. How are these metrics going to be quantified? So I'll go through the last question for Zulamet. How should flood resilience be measured from an environmental perspective? So flood resilience impacts to the environment. So again, there are different thoughts on how these impacts can be measured, or metrics for measuring these impacts. So this is what we really need your thoughts on. I see On slide 2, question 2, are there areas you suspect saltwater intrusion is already occurring? Death of tree death, definitely.
Hey Jenny, I'm back. For some reason, the Zoom kicked me out for a little bit there, but I'm back.
No problem. So I went over some of the other environmental quality aspects as far as restoration, species risk, species loss, cultural resource risk or cultural resource loss, critical habitat affected, and questions on how to quantify and what metrics can be tracked for environmental quality.
No, that's fantastic. So definitely, if anybody of you have any recommendations on which particular matrix can be measured under environmental quality, please provide the input on the first page in terms of matrix and how to measure and what to measure. So were you able to discuss question number 2, Jenny? I was in the middle of discussing that one.
I did read mock sticky note, areas where salinity is already occurring or saltwater intrusion is already occurring. Some areas with tree death, possibly indications that will need to be looked at. But if there is any agency or group that may be tracking saltwater intrusion that they have information about, would be a very good resource to have. I mean, there are definite resources with the counties, but if there are local groups or initiatives that are handling salinity or saltwater intrusion, doing additional studies, and even college theses. I mean, there's so many programs that may be tracking some of this information that we don't know about. So that's what these sessions are about as well. Just making sure that we have all the data we possibly can.
Absolutely. And in the maps that we have for this section, there's some information in there in the legend in terms of, my understanding is that there's some information in terms of saltwater interface information. So if you see anything in those maps that should be looked at, or perhaps there's more recent information or any data that is looking at those saltwater interfaces delineations differently, please feel free to highlight it, if not for all, for on a specific reach, depending on your local knowledge. And I think the third question is, how should flood resilience be measured from an environmental perspective? So again, if you have any ideas in terms of like how to measure flood resilience using any of the current or the existing flora and fauna changes, let us know so we can track it as a potential matrix. And if you have any ideas on how to measure or how we can use some of the data, as you remember in the presentation from Miss Amanda Brederson, she highlighted that she has information in terms of stage, groundwater. There's information on flows. So if there's anything from the outputs of Mike Shee that could be useful to kind of measure some of the environmental impacts, for this study and you have any ideas, feel free to add them.
They see the sticky note about the University of Miami Sea Hive program. I'm not sure that we've contacted them. That's a really cool idea. I wrote that down. I'm going to make sure that we have all their information. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
I
And
see in time, we have about 15 more minutes on this one, and then we will close out all of the Jamboards. And Gustavo is going to stand at the podium and do kind of a recap of all the discussions also in the building. So 15 more minutes. I don't see any questions. Do we have sticky notes on any of the maps? A little bit, HD.
I do want to highlight that for question number 3, in terms of how should flood resilience be measured from the environmental perspective, we have some ideas on conservation and restoration benefits. So thank you for the input. If you have any thoughts on how to measure it and what to measure in terms of what type of input could be used to determine that conservation or restoration benefits, that will be appreciated. And I also see that there was an idea here in terms of water quality matrix for both land-based habitats and coastal areas. And one condition could be, or one matrix could be improved conditions. Could be an indication of flood resiliency. So again, thank you for all the ideas. We'll definitely be compiling them all and considering them as part of our development of matrix for evaluation and comparison of alternatives.
We do have a hand raised, Ms. Dulamet. Mr. Devon, can you unmute Carol Ballard? Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I was just I was thinking along the lines of cultural resource and all that. Would this category include anything, communities that are maybe of historical importance, or buildings that are historical importance, or something like that? Would that be information that could be used under this category? I don't know if that information may be available from local governments too.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol, for that question. That type of information, we're tracking it more for the other social effects, but that does not preclude us to perhaps look at an angle that could be compatible for environmental quality. So definitely that's a good thought that we can track and see on which purview could be potentially included in EQ. So appreciated that input.
All right, thank you.
So archaeological and cultural, I think, was included in this, but there are certain aspects about, more towards environmental quality, maybe not less archaeological sites, and instead of like buildings, historic buildings, maybe that might be a social effect instead of environmental quality.
Correct. I believe that in the discussion from economics, I have always heard that there's some gray areas. There's depending on the item. It could fit one category versus the other, depending on like how we're measuring it and what we're measuring it. So that's why it's important to look at that perspective as well, the how and the what, to really determine if it's going to fit in one category versus the other. And I will encourage everyone, any idea, just plug it in, because if perhaps your idea might not fit that well in EQ, for example, and the best fit is red, for example, we're going to compile their information and just redistribute it and discuss it as a group, and give you that feedback. So feel free, like if you think there's something that you have missed for the red account or the OSCE account, but you're in the EQ Jamboard, just make a note and say reference to OSCE, or if you're unclear, just add it in here and we make sure we double check and we place it in, perhaps in the correct, in the most adequate category, or in a place that we can discuss it further.
All right, I just got the notice that we are closing up the internal sessions inside the building. And in the next minute or two, Gustavo is going to get on and do some closing remarks and a recap of the sessions. So I'll start sharing the PowerPoint again once everything is closed up and Gustavo can get at the podium.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. And while you do that, I just want to again thank you very much, everyone, for sticking up with us, for providing input. I saw there was some last minute additions to the EQ category, slide number 2. So thank you very much. The information will be compiled and will be used for the development of this study. So thank you. Thank you very much. This is what makes this effort a real collaboration. So I appreciate all the active participation that we have had in this virtual breakout session. And Jenny, just to let you know, we're still seeing EQ Jamboard.
Okay, I paused my slideshow. I am putting these Jamboard sessions into a PDF real quick, because Gustavo had mentioned to make sure and capture everything immediately before anything changes. And he is pulling up the slideshow as we speak. All right, everyone should see my PowerPoint. Are we seeing it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Now I can see it.
All right, I'm going to mute. Gustavo's going up to the podium.
We're going to start the recap. Make sure that the selected leader of this table will be presenting and the economist also in this table. We will have the leader and economist in front of the room for the summary. And you are the leader and the economist. Okay. So we start with reach A.
Reach A. Okay, so, sure.
Yeah, that's my microphone.
Sure. All right. So starting with the RAD impacts and some of the things we talked about. Lucky for us, Broward County is well underway with a study that actually does quite a bit of RAD analysis. So that'll be ready in November. So just in time for our use, which is really great. A few of the things that they'll be measuring, miles of road impacted. They're going to look at the criticality of the road, how often it's impacted, lost wages and lost tax revenue. That was one of the examples that I had up on the screen. So it's really great to see Broward is already measuring that. Makes our job a lot easier. So that's nice. They're looking into airport impacts, definitely part of the regional economy. We spoke with some representatives from Pompano. They're measuring NFIP increases, and we were National Flood Insurance Protection premium increases, and we thought there may be an opportunity to look into increases to business insurance. So can they hear me okay? No? Yeah, okay. Good. And then also, the change in housing growth, they're looking into measuring. I don't remember when they said their study was going to be done, and they're gone now, so I can't check back, but a couple examples of things we can measure there. A lot of stuff for EQ. Had a good lengthy discussion on environmental quality and stepping outside of my lane a little bit here, so I'll do my best. Saltwater intrusion around S13 was discussed fairly heavily. And then the well field at G54, there's going to be some 2024 data available for us, we think anyway. Possible flow constraint at C11 for water quality in Everglades. Talked about that. Discharges through salinity control structures, trying to measure how often extreme discharges occur. In addition to that, water temperature measurements and turbidity measurements for potential impacts within the canals, the habitat. Storage for pre-storm discharge. So you can measure that, I guess, in the pre-storm discharge capacity in the, I guess, in a width, but had difference across the structures and how often in days structures are non-operational. OSE, we discussed septic impacts. It's often, there's often a higher density of septic within socially vulnerable communities. So we can measure, how often septic tanks are impacted. Energy burden, again, Broward is already measuring this locally, so we might have a better way to look at it than what we have on these maps here, which base that on national data. I think the energy one was blank because it's based on national percentile. So this is a little bit more local. So that might be a good thing to look at a little closer. Again, look closer at some of the climate change impacts to the east. We have a map with stickers on it where we identified some of these locations. There was concern that the climate justice data might skew again because it's nationally based versus locally, which is something to look into. And then duration of flooding on the roads. We already have that under RAD, but this could be important in socially vulnerable communities as well. That is our recap. Any questions? All right. Yeah, no worries.
Hello, everyone. My name is Munir Ingram. I am a member and president of Little River Farms HOA, and I represent my senior citizens, my veterans, my Americans with disabilities that live along the C7 Canal. We talked about the RAD, we spoke about green jobs and adaptation jobs. There is a community school, Turner Tech, that could probably have expanding programs to teach the students about the ecology of the area. The business impacts. When it comes to flooding in our area, we're more residential than we have businesses. We're more of a farm area. But what we're facing right now is redevelopment because the land is very cheap in this unincorporated areas. So we're having developers that are coming in, purchasing the land and changing the zoning codes presently on the books. Though it's going to be a loss when it comes to flooding, the loss of the disposable income with all these projects happening in Miami-Dade County. Because we live in unincorporated Miami-Dade County, we do not receive the funding. As you can see, I represent myself in the community, but we look around the tables, we have different cities, villages that have the funding, and they receive those fundings from the county to do the projects. But we're looking for the funding to be allocated and specifically stay within our areas so that we can mitigate these problems that we already deal with as we deal with the hurricanes and everything like that. We're sometimes last on the list to be looked at. And then also how often and how much and how long these flooding events are going to occur. With the Everglades Restoration Project happening north of us, and we also have the C8 and C9 studies already done, we recognize that there's going to be more flooding or more water coming from the northern regions of our area from Broward to North Dade, from District 1 into District 2. There are many municipalities that are receiving funds for the adaptation action area plannings. But we recognize that with all that amount of water coming through those canals, that the C7 and the residents along the C7 canal going into the village of Miami Shores and El Portal Village is going to have more flooding, which will then directly impact the pollution going into the bay that we're trying to also mitigate as we're talking about. And also looking at the tax base. The tax base is another issue because I have my senior citizens and veterans and Americans with disabilities. We have the tax base, but they don't necessarily have the funding to do the septic to sewer connection. So we're going to need those grants from all the entities that are working with Miami-Dade County to jurisdictions to actually work with the unincorporated Miami-Dade County departments. And we also like Durham to actually reach out to us and actually have the funding that's going to be allocated. When it comes to the environmental equity or environmental justice, we understand that now we are going to have more flooding because now that there are certain projects that have been already passed by the county to rezone our area. And it's the infilling of a freshwater 80-acre lake, which is Silver Blue Lake, that has been passed. And there's also another project, West Group, that has recently been passed to change the zoning from residential housing to limited apartment housing. And it's not congruent, which presently on the books, because that area and these areas have not been developed for over 50, 60 years. And right now, those areas are a watershed for the Little River as we speak. Also, we talked about the wildlife fragmentation because of the structures. We're trying to limit and reduce the amount of heat islands that are going to be created by this limited apartment housing, especially when we look at the Silver Blue Lake. If that lake is filled in, right now is the inland water storage that everyone was talking about, and already retains 80 acres of freshwater fresh water for the drinking water of Miami-Dade County in the future. Also, my village of Miami Shores was talking about saltwater intrusion into their canals and also the Biscayne Canal. So with the Little River, we're still a freshwater canal as we speak. So if those structures are already polluted or going to possibly pollute it, you're going to have less fresh water flowing into the Biscayne Bay from the C7 basin or from the C7 canal. Moving forward, and also they said that, we can't pump our way out of this solution. That was something that was brought up by one of the Bay officers, that we can't pump our way out of it, and that the future development has to be congruent with what's going on in the future. And I think that's what brought us and brought myself and my constituents into this planning process. Back in April, we tried to get ahead of the planning because we weren't getting the reports from the developers when we were concerned about the flooding risk, because the C7 is identified as a high risk area for everything we talked about, but we didn't get that information. So now moving forward to the social or the OAC, we want to make sure that it's consistent with our future planning, that the green space and the blue spaces are preserved. We would like to see also the improvements of the Little River Park, the expansion of that park, to have more amenities, because we recognize that not every kid in the unincorporated areas of Miami-Dade County is going to be athletic. We want to try to move some of these children into some of the science, technical, engineering, arts, and math programs that are lacking in our community, lacking in specifically the unincorporated areas of Miami-Dade County, specifically the C7 area, which is the Westview region of District 2, but also District 1. But District 3 also overlaps in some of those unincorporated areas. Also, just to bring back the evaluation of the canal side development is important. We want to make sure that the lake filling or the potential lake filling is incongruent, that it will not produce any pollutions that will affect the groundwater of the future of Miami-Dade County. We also wanted our area to be looked at as far as areas of environmental critical concern, because we recognize that where we're located on Northwest 18th Avenue and Northwest 107th Street, this is an area that's a very large open space. If you look at your map along the C7 Canal, there's a bend, and you'll see a lake that's just east of that silver of C7 Canal, that we want to make sure that that lake can be utilized as an economic resource for the children in the community. Instead of going under the improvements of saying workforce housing, we like to see more development as far as environmental concerns. Okay, seeing that the children have an opportunity to eat fresh fish, because some people unfortunately have to eat from those canals of fish. Not everybody has a boat that goes out into the ocean, but even with the oceans being polluted, you're still equally impacted. And this is something that we wanted to make a concern, that with the C7, with the developments that are already presently on the books, if we get flooded, everything down south is going to be flooded. So it's important that the unincorporated areas of Miami-Dade County are looked at thoroughly. Another aspect of that social justice, critical environmental concerns, but also we wanted to bring up Resilient 305, addressing the study and monitoring that's happening right now, because our communities aren't resilient. Some of those communities can't come back from a flood incident that may happen recently. We know that hurricanes, and with the Miami Back Bay study, we have all that information, all that water coming in from the storm surge, and it hasn't been properly mitigated along the C7 Canal. We're going to have more saltwater intrusion, and we're going to have more flooding from the northern regions of our county and also going south. So we're trying to mitigate that. Also, we want historically and natural systems have been ignored for a very long time in our area. And we're also seeing that the groundwater rise in our area. We can see the fluctuation in the waters of the C7 Canal, and anything that would be added to it will cause even more detrimental aspects, not only to the environment, but to the community. And we also wanted to piggyback on the adaptation action area, the Little Rivers adaptation action area and sea level rise when it comes to what the Office of Resiliency has done with Miami-Dade County, Army Corps of Engineers, with the Back Bay study. We see the improvements, but we also recognize that we would like to see that study expanded west of 95, so we can get the same type of mitigation and adaptation that we see in Broward, the C8 and C9 canal, to also be brought in through to the C7 coming out of the city of Miami Gardens, the city of Opa-locka, so that those individuals that aren't represented here today are aware. We also like to let the District 2 Commissioner know that we're concerned about our environment and also the constituents. So like I said, I bring this to you from a grassroots level. I represent my senior citizens, my veterans, my Americans with disabilities, and also for the future and health of Miami-Dade County. Because the main factor what brought this up for our community was the lack of respect for the environment and the community. When we brought our concerns to the public hearings about development and land use, it was basically shoved to the side and said, we're going to do it anyway, without getting these studies. And I tried to make this very clear to South Florida Water Management, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that these studies need to be done so it can be thoroughly vetted before these projects are done, because it deals with health and safety, not only for Miami-Dade County, but for all of the state of Florida. Thank you for your time. This is Reach B, the C7 Little Canal and Basins. Thank you very much.
All right, so we were reach C, which is the Miami River. So under economic, we talked about the importance of the selected plan not to transfer flood risk downstream, and there's discussion of different communities. We talked about in depth about needing to come up with a depth duration curve that translates to downtime for properties and coming up with an average annual losses for non-residential occupancy properties. And then we talked about repetitive losses. We have the data for repetitive losses. So how do we project that as far as certain percentage of repetitive losses that get acquired to be turned into parks or, turned into storage areas that how that translates to lost tax base. Under environmental justice, again, not transferring the flood risk downstream. We also talked about again, the repetitive losses, turning those properties into parks, quantifying how much area you could get that way. And then we talked about briefly at the end, septic to sewer. We have, the county has a program to convert septic to sewer, and there's a very aggressive push for grant money at different federal, state level to do that, to help communities connect to sewer and get off of septic. And we have that very well mapped as far as which areas are currently failing, which areas are projected to be failing, and which areas are, long-term failing. And then under environmental quality, again, the non-transfer of risk, that pretty much covered all three, but we also talked about increasing, trying to minimize the increased flows to the bays, because that will affect seagrasses. And then how that ties into other Army Corps projects, particularly Everglades restoration and BVCR, and how that could be leveraged to minimize flows to the bay and use those western wetlands as storage and water quality treatment. And then we briefly talked about the need to map culturally significant areas. I know there's you all already have the state data set, but each community, each municipality has other properties that they may consider significant that are not in that state database. So just reaching out and compiling that data, for you to be able to work around it. That's it.
Steve?
Is it still the morning? Oh. Good afternoon, I think. Excellent. I'm Ava again. I'm representing the back table there, Reach D. So we actually came up with 6 performance metrics that we thought about as a team. And the first one is the potential for salinity intrusion to affect water supply for people, which could be categorized as wells for homes that may no longer work and need to be transitioned into the municipal water system, which is a cost to the people. And then the wells that are for the Florida Keys Aqueduct Authority, which are in South Dade area. Our next PM is the potential for salinity intrusion to affect water supply for agriculture, which can be calculated with a threshold or a semi-qualitative type of metric. But there's really 2 things to consider. It's the change in salinity intrusion affects the viability of agricultural overall, but it also then creates the need to transition to other types of crops, depending on where you are. So an example that our team gave was the fact that tree farms are only now viable in the coastal ridge because they have a sensitivity to the saltwater intrusion in a way that maybe there could have been avocados grown in the southern part of the county where that no longer can occur. So that's an example of an effect. We good? Okay.
The next one would be the resources and the ability to respond to acute events. An acute event could be, significant storm like the Fort Lauderdale storm that we had this past year. And so some examples of the way to measure that would be administrative costs, lost wages, permanent loss of business. And in here, we were really wanting to emphasize not just the general loss of a business, but what if you lost a small business that may be in a disadvantaged community, and the ripple effects of that permanent loss would be categorized differently than general loss of business. Hospital access, so access to healthcare, loss of wages to the daily wage earner, which would be different than losing a business. Then we have our next PM is the likelihood or risk that flood insurance is denied. We were lucky to have a FEMA person in our table. And so there's two ways to capture that, either the federal side or the private side. And we felt like that was different than losing coverage. So you can either be denied or you can capture, which is the next one, the risk that your flood insurance coverage is reduced. And that's a different impact. Our last one was the impacts to transportation infrastructure, which is similar to, I think, was captured in Reach A, which is using Miami-Dade County's and Broward County's analyses of FPLOS type data. So the number of lanes that are shut down and the depth in those lanes is a different impact or a different metric that could be used. And that could use Mike Shee data. So that one's a quantifiable one. Those were the ones that we were, really sure could be PMs. The ones where it was more of an evolving conversation and we ran out of time was, how do we make sure that in other social effects, the word other isn't made to be lesser, that other is just a word, it doesn't mean lesser, because those tend to be narrative or categorical metrics or the way that we think about them. And so we were discussing the risk to the study, and how can we be strategic, how can we be savvy to make sure that the NED information is important. And then there's an and to these narrative categorical descriptions. And so we were recognizing that that's hard and that we need to work on that a lot. One of the things that we talked about that's an example is the burden of increased cost of power to financially constrained communities. So recognizing that Miami has a lot of those communities. And even though Miami has Turkey Point, that doesn't mean that an increase in rates doesn't significantly affect a community that already is fiscally constrained. So that's an example of something that's hard to describe. And then that led to the discussion that which somebody else said, I think it was Eric, that the federal databases must be supplemented with the local knowledge that we have. Two examples are Chapter 8 of the Water Management District's Resiliency Plan and the Broward County analysis that either has come out or is coming out, which I keep forgetting. But the main topic there is the need and the urgency to supplement the federal databases. That's what I got.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, I appreciate everybody being here today. We have about 10 minutes left. I think we're just going to wrap it up, but I just wanted to say that this will be your only time to provide input, right? I know we threw a lot of information at you quickly, and I think we'll take this and we'll learn some lessons. We'll come back probably a little more organized, figure out a way to break it up in bite-sized pieces where we can get information. So this won't be our only time to come out and to collect data. We have an email, I believe Gustavo can provide to, okay. Okay. So these are our websites, and then there's an email at the top. You can provide comments to, you can also send data there. Our team checks that email and can, you know, you can ask questions and we'll be able to get data there. But, you know, I just wanted, our next step really are to continue this conversation as we, you know, make our way through all of these areas. And so, Tim, is there anything else you wanted to wrap up?
Yeah, I guess just a couple of housekeeping items. I stand on it, so yeah, so we'll send out an email. We can send out the presentations. I think either send the maps or link to the maps so you can have access to those. As Marcy said, this is just the first time that we're meeting to talk about metrics. So I'm sure you'll think of other things. Please send those in, whether it's via the email addresses that are in the presentation, which I can also include in the email that I'll send out, or contact one of us directly. So that process will evolve. We'll make sure that we take all this information, kind of consolidate it, come back to you, and then continue this conversation. Because we've got a ways to go before we can take all this information and actually have metrics that we can use. So I think that's probably it for today. Everybody's probably really hungry and ready to go eat some lunch. So I don't want to stand up here and talk, but really appreciate everybody coming out today. This is an invaluable part of the process. You guys are part of our team, and without you, we will not be successful, especially when we talk about our total benefits. So thank you again for coming out here, and look forward to continuing our discussions. Oh, Melissa has a question. Yes, so don't take anything with you. Yeah, leave it here. We're going to collect it. We'll make sure it's all disseminated back out.
All right, one thing that we have in the tables, we have processing now, we have a meeting. You have somebody what it's going to.
All right, no one is standing at the podium again, so I'm going to adjourn the online meeting. If anyone else has any questions, please send it to that Army Corps email address. Or you can contact me or Tim Geisen directly. If you need my number, just let me know. I don't think there's anything else. Anyone have any questions before we adjourn? Any hand raises?
No, Jenny, I just want to thank everyone once more. Thank you, Jenny, also for facilitating the virtual section.
All right. Thank you all for attending.